Hi there, this is Andy from Blessed Man Meditations. Recently, Alex O'Connor from Cosmic Skeptic posted a video containing about 40 arguments for atheism. I have no personal vindictive vendetta against Alex or against any other atheist. I love Alex, and I love all atheists as my fellow people, all created in God's image. But I believe their epistemology is wrong and needs to be responded to. This video will be part of a lengthy series I plan to do in response to each argument Alex makes. So please like this video, comment, and please subscribe. I hope you have a blessed rest of your day.
A new, fast-growing Christian YouTube channel, Redeemed Zoomer, put out a video promisingly called All Atheist Arguments Answered in 10 Minutes. Let's see how he does.
Christianity supported slavery. Well, sure, some Christians did, but all human civilizations have had slavery. Christian civilization was the first one to abolish it on moral grounds.
Sure, many societies condone slavery throughout history, but you claim that your tradition is the correct one, with access to the will of the God of the universe. Yes, Aristotle condoned slavery, but his Politics is not thought to be a divinely authored text. Why did it take so long, literally over 1,000 years, for Christian society to abolish slavery if it was so obviously against God's will the whole time?
In this response, we're going to answer Alex's objection. If God, why slavery? Or put another way, why is there anything evil in the world? This is a way of asking the question about the problem of evil. To recap, in the Redeemed Zoomer video to which Alex responded, Redeemed Zoomer said every human civilization had slavery. Christians led the abolition of slavery on moral grounds. Alex responds and says, many civilizations condoned slavery throughout history, but Christians claim their way is the correct way. And Christians, Alex says, claim to have access to the will of the God of the universe. So Alex asks, why did it take Christians so long to abolish slavery if it was so obviously against God's will the whole time? And in response to Alex's very good question, I would say that there are lots of things that God permits sinful people to continue practicing that are not ideal for them to continue practicing, or are outright sinful for them to continue practicing. Other examples include, but are not limited to, abortion, euthanasia, divorce, adultery, fornication, theft, lying, blasphemy, other unwholesome language, suicide, love for the world, alcoholism, gluttony for that matter, illegal drug addiction. These are things that are not ideal for people to practice, or are outright sinful for them to continue practicing. There were some laws against some of the things listed above in the Old and New Testaments. None of the things listed above have been completely eradicated. Even in our industrialized society that is far advanced from those from ancient Near Eastern days, the above harmful practices are still condoned as they are permitted to exist, just like slavery was permitted to exist for all those years. In fact, some form of slavery has still not been completely eradicated in other societies. It is not the Christian's primary job to eradicate the sinful practices in their respective societies. It is the Christian's primary job to preach the gospel and let the gospel change people's hearts. When the gospel changes hearts, then societies will change. When the gospel changes hearts, then laws that govern societies will change. God permitted people to continue to practice slavery, a less than ideal situation. If we're going to complain because God did not intervene and permitted slavery to go on as he did, would we also want God to intervene and stop our blasphemy, our fornication, our adultery, our murder, the dishonoring of our parents, and the myriad of other things that are allowed to continue and oftentimes are championed in many societies, would we want God to stop those things? The answer to the rhetorical question is the same as the answer to Alex's question about why did it take Christians so long to abolish slavery. Why haven't Christians abolished blasphemy if it was so obviously against God's will the whole time? Why haven't Christians abolished adultery if it is so obviously against God's will the whole time? Why haven't Christians abolished fornication if it is so obviously against God's will the whole time? Why haven't Christians abolished suicide if it is so obviously against God's will the whole time? Why haven't Christians abolished murder if it is so obviously against God's will the whole time? Why haven't Christians abolished dishonoring parents by children if that is so obviously against God's will all the time? Why haven't Christians abolished parents mistreating their children if parents mistreating their children is so obviously against God's will the whole time? Why haven't Christians abolished husbands mistreating and abusing their wives if that is so against God's will? Why haven't Christians abolished wives mistreating husbands if it is so obviously against God's will? Frank Turek has well said in response to objections like this that if God were going to step in and intervene and stop the various evils in society, he would have to start intervening and stop me. What's more, critic, if God's going to step in and intervene and stop evil in society, he'd have to start with you.
I said, yes, sir. And he said, if there is a good God, why doesn't he stop all the evil in the world? Sir, that is an excellent question. Maybe because if he did, he might start with you and me, because we do evil every day. Do you ever notice when we complain about evil, we're always complaining about somebody else? Hey, God, why don't you stop him? Hey, God, why don't you stop her? We never say, God, why don't you stop me? Because if God wanted to stop evil, he might just start with me. He might just start with you. In fact, if God were to stop evil tonight at midnight, would you still be alive at 12:01? I wouldn't be.
That Alex has the freedom to make videos like that, and that I have the freedom to make responses like this, that you have the freedom to agree or disagree with Alex, and that you have the freedom to agree or disagree with me, demonstrates that God is patient and chooses not to intervene as often as he justifiably could. The fact is, we live in a fallen world. This world is not supposed to be perfect. The Christian understands this and understands that this world is not their home. The Christian's job is not to make this world too comfortable. This world is supposed to be a dark place, since the vast majority of this world vehemently opposes the God Christians say governs the world. How could the Christian be light in a dark place if the world were no longer a dark place? The Christians are to confront the culture through the preaching of the gospel and are to go through any open doors God opens for them. I suggest that the critic resist their myopic tendencies, resist the temptation to criticize God for failing to meet their standard of goodness, and examine themselves to see that there is plenty of evil that God has not stopped them from practicing in their own lives. Let me switch places with Alex for a minute. Let me pretend for a minute to adopt Alex's position. Let me put Alex's question another way, from Alex's seat. Atheists claim their way is the correct way, and atheists claim to have access to the knowledge of how the universe came to be and how it should be run. My listeners shouldn't mislead themselves into thinking this is not the case. If atheists didn't claim their way is the correct way, and if atheists didn't claim to have access to the will of how the universe came to be and how it should be run, they wouldn't have debates and they wouldn't have YouTube channels themselves. So if the atheist way is the right way, why haven't they brought an end to all the evils that plague our world, including the very evil they call religion itself? If their way is so much better, why haven't they ended murder? If the atheist way is so much better, then why haven't the atheists ended adultery? If the atheist way is so much better, why haven't the atheists ended suicide? If the atheist way is so much better, why haven't atheists ended abuse and misuse? If anything, people could use atheism to justify those evils, since on atheism there is no divine judgment, no punishment to fear to make them want to stop practicing the evils. On atheism, the only thing the offender has to worry about is getting caught in this life by law enforcement. So Alex has to tread carefully. But so do Christians. Christians need to remember that God strictly judges those who dishonor him while claiming to represent him. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And have a blessed rest of your day.